Good morning, viewers and listeners of Concerned Citizens Media. Thank you again for joining me. It is very hard to update you with the Ramadan fasting, but I'll try to come back and say something on what's going on in Ethiopia or around the world. So it's a little bit difficult. So. The war in Russia, Ukraine, I mean, the invasion of Ukraine by Russian forces is still ongoing. It's a very devastating war happening, impacting civilian lives, and it's destroying Ukraine. So it's still going on, no closing for that serious issue so far. The United Nations General Assembly tried to remove Russia from UN Security Council. That was not successful, and the Biden and others calling for criminal lawsuit against Vladimir Putin, genocide, and some even calling for a warrant for his arrest. So the situation is very tense. The war is still going on. The civilians are suffering. Despite ongoing negotiation between Ukrainian officials and Russian, the war is still happening. When it comes to the war in Western Tigray, Eritreans came back with heavy enforcement. Now, according to different reports, they are in Humera with a very dominant force. So Eritreans, ignoring the international calls, the United States, European Union call upon Eritreans to leave Tigray, to leave Ethiopia in general, but they are still messing around, showing their muscles on Ethiopian territories. They are not out. They are even expanding their control in that area and beyond. So TDF is still challenging them, fighting back to remove them from that area, but they are reinforcing their forces from Eritrea, and they are not out. They are still there. The other thing is OLA, Oromo Liberation Army, is also continue its advance toward the capital city, Addis Ababa. They are heavily surrounding the capital city, according to different news outlets. They are not too far from Arat Kilo. And even, taking control of some close by cities. So they are around. They are still becoming a dominant force, despite the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed bringing soldiers to fight OLA, to dismantle OLA. There is a war declared on OLA, and Oromos are also suffering for many years under Prime Minister. Not only OLA, the regular people are also suffering under his declaration, because they are not separating the civilians from armed people. They're just using their power to commit grave human rights violations. So it's still ongoing. the burning of residential areas, arresting individuals suspected of supporting OLA. So many kind of atrocities happening, but despite all this, OLA is still gaining ground, and they are very closing in Finfinne or Addis Ababa. So the Amnesty International, Amnesty International organization and the UN Human Rights Watch combined uh, together and released a very serious report on the genocide carried out by Fano and the Amara militia in coordination Ethiopian and Eritrean forces, especially in Tigray, Western Tigray. So I have that one. Also, some other news and a couple of videos at the end. So thank you again for joining me. Today is not March, April the 6th, 2022. Let's get started. Let's read very quickly. The first one is Oromia state government warned extremist forces operating in the name of Amara in infiltrating region and committing disgusting acts. This is a press release by Oromia regional state. The Oromia regional state government issued a statement warning of an unnamed group that it referred to extremist force operating in the name of Amara, who are the main enemies of the Amara and the Ethiopia nations and nationalities. The statement said these forces have infiltrated into the Oromia region and committed disgusting acts which have gravely angered the people of the region, and warned that the Oromia state government strongly believes that it is appropriately that it not appropriate remain silent when these extremist forces disseminated its disgusting acts using various media outlets, including the regional government media, and preaching hatred and violence. The regional state government said multinational unity and brotherhood were the foundation of a strong Ethiopian unity, and that standing together for the common good, strengthening our common values rather than differences, was a lasting solution. Extremism has no nationality or religious representation, it said, added that it does not benefit anyone at all. As long as there is anti-people sentiment, we must fight it together, it said, and alluded to the importance of process of creating consensus on the issues of disagreement as a means to dry up the source of our problems and strengthening the constitution. The Oromia National Regional State strongly supports ongoing efforts of the national dialogue to end this cycle of conflict once for all, it said. However, it blamed that instead of recognizing the extremism is anti-people, no matter where it comes from, the fighting it together, pointing fingers has become dominantly visible. Sacrifice to be paid is to save the country and the people, not to give the opportunity to extremist forces operating in the name of Amara, The statement further went on accusing these extremist forces of causing untold national damage and eroding our values. It also said that the ultimate goal of these extremists was to fulfill TPLF conspiracy to create enmity between the Oromo and Amara peoples. If the evil deeds of these extremists are not stopped at one place, it will create another dangerous situation in our country, it warned. Accusation and counter-accusation is mounting among various non-state actors and zonal officials in Oromia and Amara states after clashes on 29 March between armed groups from the Minjar Shenkora Woreda of North Shore Zone, Amara Regional State, and local militia in the bordering Fentalle Woreda, East Shore Zone of Oromia Regional State, resulted in the deaths of at least 26 local militias and members of Oromia Police, including the militia commander Abdisa Ifa on 29 March. So that is a press release, very strong press release by Oromia Regional State on the killing of 26 militia, including the commander. So, but so far, no accountability for the deaths of 26 people. You know, this is common in Ethiopia these days. This is about the expansionist agenda of Amara taking territories from Oromia region. 280 hectares of land from Kimbipti Woreda in North Shore Zone of Oromia region annexed to Amara region. A large piece of land, 200 hectares in the Kimbipti Woreda of North Shore of the Oromia region has fallen under the administration of the Amara regional government under unknown circumstances, according to a statement posted on the Woreda's communication bureau. The statement also added that the development of Amara special forces in the Woreda is making life difficult for the local farmers, preventing them from moving around freely. The Communication Bureau discussed the 3 decades-long land grabbing that continues threatening the livelihoods of the local farmers. It also stated that the area has fallen under the jurisdiction of the Amara Regional State in recent years. The statement recalled that in 1985, Holeta Agricultural Research Center seized 280 acres of land from 22 households to open up a bureau for the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, with the promise of introducing modern sheep rearing to the local community. Fukadu Ragasa, a resident of Sinke Kabale in Kimbipti Woreda, remembered that the community was promised jobs, better access to research and development, and a better future for their children. Fukadu told Addis Standard. Fukadu's household has 8 members, which he supports by farming. He said more than 4 acres of land he inherited from his father was taken, with The remaining land, he can barely put food on the table for his family. Fikadu take up additional labor jobs to put his children through school. However, the research center stopped operation in 2005 without fulfilling any promise, the statement continued, adding, when the institution discontinues its operation a few years later, it left the land to its employees instead of the local farmers to whom the land belongs to, the statement said, adding, suddenly the land fell under the jurisdiction of the Amara region. Fikadu recalled that the land was then handed over to a milk production company. Years later, the land ended up being administered by the Amara region, he said, adding, we don't know how our land is now in another region. Our question for the Oromia regional government fell on deaf ears. Warku Dadi, another farmer whose land was taken by the institution, said, we have been sending representatives to government offices, but none of them pay attention to our case. They reassure us by telling us that our land should not be taken away unlawfully, but they never try to get us justice. He continued, recently we were told that this area is the Amara region and that we'll not find jobs unless we have an ID issued by the Amara regional state. Now the land is serving as a military camp for the Amara Special Force. We fear for our lives as we go about our day. Residents told Addis Standard that among 22 households whose land were unlawfully taken away by the institution, some of them fled their homeland, while those who stayed behind are living in poverty. The administration of Kimbipti Woreda, Mogas Nagash, corroborated the statement of the local farmers and expressed solidarity with the local farmers. He vowed that the administration will continue to demand justice from donal to federal echelons of government structure and urged the community to stay put. At this standard attempt to speak to Kimbipti Woreda Administrator Mogas Nagash and the Kimbipti Woreda Head of Land Administration Tolosa Hunde for further comment was unsuccessful. So Oromia is in a tough spot. Oromia doesn't have proper administration. These are not the real representative. These are, individuals created by TDF at the time, TPLF, to promote the policy of TPLF. They are now got the opportunity. They have the bank and the tank to do whatever they want to do, but they don't care about who takes the land from Oromia, who dies in Oromia, who is arrested, tortured. They don't care. They don't care. That's why we see all the suffering, all the abuses, atrocities in Oromia. So the land grabbing and this Amara Fano militia crossing into Oromia region and attacking Oromos without any accountability, without fear of anything, continues, because we don't have the government. The government is against the Oromos. This is from a tweet by Odaa Tarbii, OLF international representative. He tweeted on April the 3rd, says, in the southern zone earlier this week, the regime forces made a full withdrawal back to Nageli Borana after losing several commanders and sustaining heavy casualties in a battle in Melka Lammi. Another tweet from Odaa Tarbii again. This is on the same day, April 3rd. The Abiy regime is once again amassing troops in the area of Oromia still under its occupation. Convoys of 10 to 20 buses were seen moving to Nakamte in western Oromia and Dagam in central Oromia. So, yes, I have seen the picture he posted. These are, public buses supposed to be serving the civilians, but the Prime Minister using them to transport soldiers. So this is a very dangerous move. Really, is very dangerous move. It can expose these civilian buses to an attack. So I don't know why they use civilian buses. They should use the military vehicles. So maybe they try to cover it up, but they are endangering civilians who are using these buses, as a transport. And in the similar way, in the past, the Prime Minister and his prosperity officials use Ethiopian Airlines to transport weapons. It has been widely reported. So they are now using public bus to transport soldiers to fight OLA. This is a press release by Oromo Liberation Army or Oromo Liberation Army and the OLF High Command. State-sanctioned ethnic cleansing Oromos has continued in Benishangul Gumuz. OLF OLA High Command press release. This is released on March 28, 2022. The state-sponsored ethnic cleansing by Abiy Ahmed and the extremist Amara forces on the Oromo people has continued in full swing. Benishangul Gumuz region is particularly becoming a staging ground for state terrorist forces comprising the Ethiopian National Defense Force, Amara Special Force, and organized Amara bandits called Fano. These forces have long turned this region into a brutal ground for innocent Oromos, Tigrayans, and the people native to the Benishangul Gumuz region. We have repeatedly reported that Amara Special Forces and the Fano militia have massacred civilians, looted the properties of their victims in the region. This state terrorism has continued unabated. On Tuesday, 22 March 2022, Amara forces extrajudicially executed Amsalu Amante, an Oromo Qero, and looted property in Dibate Woreda of Benishangul Gumuz in another clear attempt to ethnically cleanse Oromos from Benishangul Gumuz. They also burned down about 50 houses to the ground. Only a few bodies have been identified so far from the ashes. These genocidal forces operate in coordination with the state officials by organizing themselves and attacking in groups of around 200 to 400 soldiers. It is to be recalled that on Tuesday, 15th March 2022, Brahane Ragasa, a pregnant Oromo woman and a mother of 7, was brutally beheaded in another round of Stone Age savagery, which is becoming a signature accompanying atrocities being committed by Amara forces. And only 2 days later, in the morning hours of 17 March 2022, Amara forces operating in the Benishangul Gumuz region had also debused and abducted 18 Oromo students in Dibate Warada of Benishangul at a place known to local as Bishan Adi. The fate of these 12 students, Kolte Fayisa, okay, got 18 names, and the 6 other unidentified persons remain unknown. So they have the list of these 18 students abducted by Fano operations in Benishangul Gumuz. It is also to be recalled that Abiy Ahmed's security forces and the associated Amara vigilante group had killed scores of natives in Benishangul and burned ethnic Tigrayans alive in the Benishangul Gumuz region before they turned to yet another tortured version of their barbarism. We continue to call upon the international community to designate the action of Amara security forces and associated vigilante group as well as Abiy Ahmed security forces as acts of state terrorism. The international community, mindful of its responsibility to protect civilians from mass atrocity crimes, ought to do its part to constrain the regime's capacity to unleash terror on innocent civilians. At the very least, OLA expects the regime's international partners to disable the regime's financial capacity to carry out these terrorist acts on our citizens. We call on the regime's international partners and the wider international community to impose sanctions that can effectively limit its military capabilities and the financial wherewithals. Therefore, accordingly, the regime's partners ought to suspend their support for security forces. In the same vein, they ought to suspend the sale or transfer of weapons to Abiy Ahmed and his associates, including the Eritrean regime. We reiterate to our people that such a brutal affront on the humanity and the dignity of our people will not remain unanswered. The OLA will continue to do everything in its power to hold the perpetrators accountable and to see justice done. Victory to the Oromo and all oppressed peoples. OLA High Command, March 28, 2022. So that's a press release, ongoing genocide on Oromos and others in Benishangul region. I also, reported on that as a different strategy the Amara authorities now they are taking. Instead of Amara just crossing, attacking others, now they are coordinating their actions with local authorities, with the Benishangul authorities, with Oromo regional authorities. So now they are trying to be smarter, using a different strategy to commit crime on others. Instead of staying on their region, they are crossing into others' region and committing crime in coordination with local or regional authorities. I hope they will be accounted for. So this is awareness for international communities. I know they know, but they should act. They should act. And horrible crimes happening in Ethiopia under Abiy Ahmed, and they should act based on humanitarian ground. The longer these guys stay, the more horrible crimes we're gonna witness. So this is the following one is, as I said, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch, released a report on the genocide happened, especially in Western Tigray. Very horrible, horrible. I don't read the whole thing. I will leave it to you. Please print it, and keep it for record. It's very detailed what happened on Tigrayans. I will just read a little bit, and a little bit from part of the recommendation. The title is Crimes Against Humanity and Ethnic Cleansing in Ethiopia's Western Tigray Zone. Amara Regional Security Forces and the civilian authorities in Ethiopia Western Tigray Zone have committed widespread abuses against Tigrayans since November 2020 that amount to war crimes and a crime against humanity, Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch said in a new report released today on Tuesday. Ethiopian authorities have severely restricted access and independent scrutiny of the region, keeping the campaign of ethnic cleansing largely hidden. Yeah, no international media is allowed under Abiy Ahmed administration unless that international media is reporting in favor of the Prime Minister, because they want to cover up the crime. The report, we will erase you from this land. Crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing in Ethiopia's Western Tigray Zone documents how newly appointed officials in the Western Tigray and the security forces from the neighboring Amara region with acquiescences and possible participation of the Ethiopian Federal Forces systematically expelled several 100,000 Tigrayan civilians from their home using threats, unlawful killings, sexual violence, mass arbitrary detention, pillage, forcible transfer, and the denial of humanitarian assistance. All these are horrible crimes. These widespread and systematic attacks against the Tigrayan civilian population amount to crime against humanity as well as war crimes. Totally, they eliminated them, forced them to leave the area, killed them. Now, so they, in the future, they might say, let's do referendum. Let the people vote. Who are there now? The Amaras. The Tigrayans are out. The Tigrayans are forced out. So systematically, they use all kind of threats, arbitrary detention, killing threats, and telling them, if you don't leave, we will kill you. Now the Amaras control these areas. If they are successful, they're going to claim this is their land. Since November 2020, Amara officials and the security forces have engaged in relentless campaign of ethnic cleansing to force Tigrayans in Western Tigray from their homes, said Kenneth Raz, Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. Ethiopian authorities have steadfastly denied the shocking breadth of the crimes that have unfolded and have aggressively failed to address them. The Ethiopian government should ensure immediate and sustained access to the region for humanitarian agencies, release all those arbitrarily detained, and investigate appropriately, prosecute those responsible for abuses. Any consensual agreement reached by the parties to the armed conflict should include the deployment of an AU-led international peacekeeping force to the Western Tigray zone to ensure the protection of all communities from abuses. The responses of Ethiopian international and the regional partners has failed to reflect the gravity of the crimes that continue to unfold in Western Tigray, said Agnes Kolmar, Secretary General of Amnesty International. Concerned governments need to help bring an end to the ethnic cleansing campaign, ensure that Tigrayans are able to safely and voluntarily return home, and make a concerted effort to obtain justice for these heinous crimes. So it's very long report, and it's a damning report against Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, the Amara militia, the Amara authority, the Eritrean forces who engaged in the war. They're supposed to respect international law when they are waging the war, but they didn't do. And the report also suggests protection, AU peacekeeping force, be allowed as a peacekeeping force to protect these vulnerable Tigrayan, ethnic Tigrayan communities. But Abiy Ahmed, from past experience, will not tolerate any international involvement. Don't tolerate journalists, he don't tolerate peacekeepers, he don't tolerate any. So even he rejected the independent investigation because the crime is committed. The report is clear. It's only the matter of time these people will be accounted. All the, including these militias, these crazy militias, out of control, heavily armed and financed by regional government, plus by the federal government, including the Oromo regional authorities, giving them millions of dollars when Oromos are starving, dying of starvation and the drought. They are bringing check, and these people, they use that check to buy arms and kill Oromos and do all the dirty works. They are out of control. They are not bound by any laws. This one is from U.S. State Department, reported massacre in Mali. We are following the extremely disturbing account of large number of people killed earlier this week in the village of Moura in the Mopti region of central Mali. We offer our condolences to the families of all civilians who died. We are concerned that many reports suggest that the perpetrators were unaccountable forces from the Kremlin-backed Wagner Group. Other reports claim the Malian armed forces had targeted elements of known violent extremist groups. These conflict reports illustrate the urgent need for the Malian transition authorities to give impartial investigators free, unfettered, and safe access to the area where these tragic events unfolded. Immediate access to eyewitnesses and to the many individuals who are said to be in government custody is essential set the record straight. We call on Mali's transition government to grant access to the United Nations multi-dimensional integrated stabilization mission in Mali. MINUSMA to conduct a rigorous investigation as mandated by the United Nations Security Council. Failure to provide a thorough and credible accounting of the facts and accountability will only serve to sow divisions in Malian society, undermine the credibility, legitimacy, and the reputation of the FAMA, drive communities into the hands of violent extremist groups, and create conditions for more violence. So that's press release on the massacre in Mali. This is Darfur. This is also another press release by U.S. State Department. Opening of trial of former Janjaweed commander for atrocities in Darfur. The United States welcomed the opening of trial proceedings at the International Criminal Court (ICC) in The Hague in the case against Ali Muhammad Ali Abdurrahman, a former Janjaweed commander, also known as Ali Kushayab. This marks the beginning of the first trial against any senior leader for crimes committed by the Omar al-Bashir regime and the government-supported forces following the genocide and other atrocities in Darfur. In 2004, the then Secretary of State Colin Powell determined, based on part of evidence collected by the State Department, that a genocide was taking place. Since that day, the United States has steadfastly called for those responsible for genocide and other atrocities to be held accountable. The ICC has charged Abdurrahman with 31 counts of war crimes and crimes against humanity for his alleged role in the killing of civilians, rape, torture, and other cruel treatment in Darfur. For 13 years after a warrant was issued for his arrest, Abdurrahman evaded capture. Due to the commendable efforts of the authorities of the Central African Republic, Chad, France, and the leaders of the United Nations Multidimensional Integrated Stabilization Mission in the Central African Republic, Abdurrahman was arrested in the Central African Republic and transferred to the ICC in 2020. We urge Sudan to continue to cooperate with ICC when it comes to the provision of evidence and to hand over other individuals who are subject to arrest warrants so that they can stand trial. The United States is committed to the principle that those who commit atrocities must be held accountable. We are at a moment when we are again witness increased violence in Darfur and the two areas. This trial is a signal to those responsible for human rights violations and abuses in Darfur that impunity will not last in the face of the determination for justice to prevail. So that's a good sign, even though justice delayed almost like 18 years since 2004. It was horrible crime committed in that area by Janjaweed militia in Sudan. So, but it delayed, but justice is coming now for the victims. It's the same situation for those doing horrible crimes in Ethiopia. There will be accountability one day. We don't know. Maybe tomorrow, maybe after 10 years, maybe after 5 years, we don't know. But they will be accounted. Everything is documented, everything is recorded, and they will be accounted for this crime. This one is the last one. It's good for students, even though it's temporary fix. Students who have student loan. So this is another extension. Biden to extend student loan repayment pause to August 31st. The Biden administration is expected to announce on Wednesday an extension of the student loan repayment pause through August 31st. An administration official familiar with the White House decision-making said on Tuesday. The repayment moratorium has been extended multiple times since it was first put in place in March 2022 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The current pause was set to expire on May 1st. Nearly 41 million borrowers have benefited from a freeze of interest accruals, and about 27 million borrowers have not had to pay their monthly bills since the forbearance began. Credit for this one, Reuters. So it's a good fix. It's a good temporary fix for student loan borrowers, but due to the challenges related with student loan, Democrats, Senator Elizabeth Warren and others are calling for total elimination of this student loan. But Biden so far is extending the repayment multiple times. I hope he will make a decision before August 31st, eliminate it. He did for so many students, so many billions already eliminated for those students for different reasons, for permanent disability, for those students cheated by colleges and universities. So many reasons used to eliminate the debt, but now more are calling to eliminate this student debt. It's a very challenge. It's a very challenge. So thank you. That's the end of the reading. I have a couple of videos. One is about Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, in a very turmoil situation due to economic crisis, just like other countries too. The war in Russia and Ukraine is challenging the economy, the food supply. And the other one is about United Nations Security Council. So let's see what the Britain ambassador at the United Nations says. There you go. There we go.
Good afternoon. I'm going to make these remarks in my national capacity as the permanent representative of the United Kingdom. The Security Council has just met to discuss Russia's continued assault on Ukraine 40 days into the war, including the harrowing images and reports that came out of Bucha at the weekend. President Zelensky also addressed the Council following his visit to Bucha yesterday. President Zelensky's reports of the destruction and torture Russian soldiers carried out on Ukrainian civilians were extremely harrowing. He told us about the men and women who were shot in the streets with their hands tied behind their backs. He told us that women had been gang raped, including in front of their children. That people had had their limbs cut off and their tongues cut out. That Russian tanks had crushed Ukrainian families who sat in their cars, unable to escape. He told us that there must be accountability for these crimes. The UK, as current President of the Council and as a committed partner of Ukraine, will not rest until that has happened. And you'll remember that we were the early supporters of the ICC inquiry, which is now going on, and we welcome the announcement today from the Secretary General of an independent inquiry. Frankly, we found Russia blamed everyone else, but we've all seen the satellite images that show the bodies having been in Bucha for weeks. President Zelensky also called for the United Nations, the UN Security Council, and the international architecture to act on these war crimes and to reform if necessary. The United Nations was also clear. 11.3 million people have now been displaced, so we do need to investigate these crimes. And in his remarks, the Secretary-General set out the global consequences: rising food prices, more than 50 developing countries with more than 1.2 billion people affected by the ripple effects of this war. We need to silence the guns. We're all clear about that. Thank you.
President Zelensky, do you agree with him on the statement when he said that there is Security Council, but there is no peace in the world? And he even asked to remove Russia from the Security Council or to reconsider the mechanism of how the United Nations and Security Council works. Do you agree with this statement?
I think it's true that the Security Council was set up to protect peace and security in the world, and in the light of Russia's veto, we have been very restricted in our ability to act. I think it's very welcome that we've seen the General Assembly act so decisively, both to condemn Russia's invasion of Ukraine and also to call for humanitarian support. And we've seen that in those strong votes that you've seen with 141 and 140 countries. But we do need to make sure that now and in the future, the Security Council and the UN as a whole is able to respond to these sort of challenges, and that's why we're very strong supporters of the Secretary-General's common agenda, which will help drive through these reforms we need to see. Thank you.
Madam Ambassador, there seems to be a unanimous call for an independent investigation, not only in Bucha but elsewhere in Ukraine. Can you perhaps talk about how soon that can happen and what the process is in that regard?
Well, the Secretary-General announced today that he had asked for an independent inquiry, but we know that Karim Khan, the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, is already in Ukraine, and his team is already in the business of collecting evidence, and that's a very sophisticated and important part of this. So we very much welcome those developments. Thank you.
Okay, so that's
Play through all 9
UK's
films in
permanent
Lego Star Wars: The
representative
Skywalker
at
Saga.
UN.
Latest that has come in from the troubled island nation of Sri Lanka, where Gotabaya Rajapakse has now been forced to lift the state of emergency that he had imposed just 5 days earlier. Remember, the emergency had been put in place to quell the protests over the island nation's crippling economic crisis, but the anti-Rajapakse demonstrations have continued ever since unabated. Rajapakse is facing a series of setbacks. And that, of course, forced him to revoke the emergency rule ordinance that had gone into effect last Friday. A gazette was issued late on Tuesday, and the move is clearly aimed at avoiding a vote on the extraordinary laws in the parliament. The Gotabaya Rajapakse's once powerful ruling coalition is in a complete state of turmoil after a string of defections. Dozens of lawmakers have walked out of the ruling coalition. For the lawmakers that walked out of the coalition, they're now independent lawmakers, and there's been no vote count yet. But this could, of course, make decision-making extremely challenging in the House. And also what is interesting is that the Finance Minister, Ali Sabri, who was appointed just a day ago, has also resigned. So what are the next possible steps for Rajapakse? Now, if the Rajapakse government loses its majority in the parliament, then this could, of course, lead to the appointment of a new prime minister or also snap parliamentary elections in the country. If the government loses its majority, the opposition can also bring in a vote of no confidence. But it is unlikely that this will happen immediately. If a vote of no confidence is adopted, then the president could, of course, appoint a new prime minister. And the opposition can also table a resolution to dissolve the parliament altogether. This would, of course, mean snap elections for the island nation ahead of the scheduled polls that were earlier slated to be held in 2025. Remember, Sri Lanka has been plagued with unprecedented shortages of food and fuel, along with record inflation and complete blackouts. And this, of course, has inflicted widespread misery on the common people in the country. The shortages have been triggered by several factors. One of them, of course, is very poor financial management on the part of the Rajapakses. There's been a lack of foreign exchange for import. The crisis is, of course, worsening ahead of the crucial talks that are scheduled to take place with the International Monetary Fund for a loan program. Public unrest has surged. The ruling family's handling of the debt-laden economy has, of course, not gone down well with the public. There are street demonstrations that began last month that have intensified in recent days. On Tuesday, dozens of protesters gathered near the residence of the Prime Minister in the capital. University students chanted anti-government slogans and also waved placards calling for the country's president to go back home immediately. So the slogans that these university students were chanting were "Gota, go home." The Sri Lankan police, of course, resorted to anti-riot measures. It resorted to using tear gas and water cannons to disperse the protesters who were calling for their demands to be at least heard from the government.
They are cancer to this country. None of these people are depending on them. We are doing our job. We are majority of us are corporate sector or doing our own business. All what we want is a peaceful country. We don't want any other solution. Just Rajapaksa should get out of this country and they should bring back all the money that they robbed.
මේ තත්ත්වය ඇතුලේ මේ දේවල් මර්ධනය කරන්න මේගොල්ලෝ බැටන් පොළු හඳුළු ගෑස් භාවිතා කරලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ආණ්ඩුවේ මාතුන්ට අපි මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි. ඕගොල්ලෝ බැටන් පොළු වලින් නම් අපි මර්ධනය කරන්න හදන්නේ. හඳුළු ගෑස් වලින් නම් ඕගොල්ලෝ අපි මර්ධනය කරන්න හදන්නේ. ඕගොල්ලන්ට වැරදිලා මාත්‍ය. ඒ වගේම අවසාන වශයෙන් මතක් කරන්න කැමතියි මේ අපි ගත්ත ඉස්සරහට ගත්ත අඩිය අපි කිසිම වෙලාවක ඉස්සරහ පස්සට තියන්නේ නැහැ.
Alright, so this is a state of unrest that is boiling over across Sri Lanka, predominantly precipitated due to the acute financial crisis that Sri Lanka has been plunged into. And to give us more updates in terms of what's in fact happening in Sri Lanka, we're joined in by our correspondent, Dasuni Athauda, who's joining us live from Colombo. Now, Dasuni, we've seen some extraordinary measures that have been taken by the government. We saw a state of emergency that was imposed last Friday and late night yesterday. The Sri Lankan president also revoked the emergency order. What is he trying to do here?
Well, good morning, everyone. So, yes, we've had a lot of developments overnight.
And one of the key developments is that the emergency regulations that the president put forward was lifted via a gazette notification overnight. Now, this might mean that the president was aware that this would not have been passed in parliament, especially given the fact that today and tomorrow there is a special debate in place in parliament during its regular sittings to discuss the current crisis. Now, we must keep in mind that this was an economic crisis that has rapidly turned into a political crisis, and the people and even the governing faction is rapidly trying to look for solutions right now.
Okay, so that's it's a long video. So that's a test of Sri Lanka economic crisis turned into political crisis. You know, I hope they will resolve it in a peaceful manner. Now the students and all the nation in Sri Lanka, you know, all the people, they are against the government. And this is like a family-owned business. Brothers control the power, the prime minister, the president, all these financial ministers, some kind of, you know, family related business. They consider that. So the people are tired of that and tired of the economic crisis. So they need that, they want change, and they want the president to go home. So, you know, several ministers resign. You know, we are facing similar challenges in Ethiopia, but our ministers, they don't care. You know, they scare of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed or his security guards. They don't say anything except clapping hand for whatever comes out of his mouth, even telling the people to eat weeds and just put salt and eat. You know, that's the solution for the crisis. And if there is a problem living in the city, telling the people to live in the countryside. He's joking. He's playing. He's joking. He's insulting. He's insulting Ethiopians because he already checked their capacity, and they are just, you know, quiet. They don't resist him. They don't ask him. They don't challenge him when he's lying. So he can say whatever he want to say. He can tell them, you know, don't eat injera, eat bread or something. So that's the solution he's giving. He is already tested. He knows the temperature of Ethiopians. Ethiopians are very quiet people. They waiting, you know, to boil up. When it boil up, then he cannot control it. But he is controlling them now. They are not awake, and they are fighting internally. Amaras are separate, Oromos are separate, the others are, you know, quietly watching. And the Amaras are trying to get their own benefit. They don't want to unite with Oromos. And if they unite, they can bring change easily. But there is no ground for unity. Everyone is looking for its own advantage, trashing each other, insulting each other, killing each other. So the prime minister is benefiting and say whatever he want to say on the stage. So that's a challenge. And please print in Amnesty Human Rights Watch report. Very detailed is there. Keep it for record. We might, you know, one day that document might be used as a witness, as evidence for those who committed a crime against Tigrayans, against Oromos, against others in Ethiopia, especially this uncontrolled group, Fano and Amara militia. You know, they're just going around, crossing into other areas, and coordinating their actions with the regional and the local authorities. This is a crime. They are not supposed to cross into others. the federal government supposed to manage, but the federal government is weak government, is a criminal government by itself. That's why everybody is just doing whatever they want to do. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me. It's a little bit long video, so you can listen which part you want to listen. Please comment, share, like my video, so we can be the voice for the voiceless back home. And thank you again. Be safe and so long, everyone.